Planning Commission, the official local planning agency for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and unincorporated Hillsborough County. The Planning Commission provides innovative leadership and long-range vision that contributes to the creation of a thriving, prosperous community that offers opportunity, fairness, and choice in how we live, move, learn, work, and play. For more information about the Planning Commission, please call 813-272-5940. Follow us on social media or visit our website at planhillsborough.org.
Good afternoon and welcome to the August 13th, 2018 regular meeting of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation are encouraged. Please sign the register at the rear of the room and turn off any devices that may be a distraction. If you wish to address the Commission on agenda items, we ask that you please complete the appropriate public comment sign-in sheet at the rear of the room now. When addressing the Commission, please state your name and address and speak directly into the microphone. For those of you who are not familiar with our process, the meeting will be conducted as follows. An agenda item will be introduced and staff will give a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation also with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chair. Public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person, and the applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will ask questions, public comment will be closed, and upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that introduction, I will ask Commissioner Buzza to lead us in the prayer and the pledge. Please rise.
Will you bow your heads with me, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we ask for your guidance today, Lord, to give us knowledge, insight into the proceedings here today, for all the folks, the staff, commissioners, and the audience, to help us guide and find the way that you need us to find the resolutions to our problems here today, Lord. That's His blessings in your name. Amen. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Buzza. Roll call, please.
Good afternoon. Buzza? Here. Dix? Green? Present. Joseph? Here. Kress? Here. Marino? Here. Thrower? Wilds? Dickerson? Here. Rodriguez?
Here.
Dowdy?
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item up for approval is minutes from the following meetings: the regular meeting of May 14th, the regular meeting of June 11th, and the Tampa and Temple Terrace public hearings, both from June 11th. Do we have a motion to approve? Have a motion by Commissioner Marino and a second by Commissioner Green. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries by members present. Brings us to item number 2, public input for items not scheduled on the agenda. If anybody would wish to address the Commission on items that are not on our agenda today, now is your opportunity. Okay, seeing none, brings us to item number 3, presentation of the MPO School Safety Top 10 Report. Ms. Silva. Mike.
I'll turn it on. Lisa Silva, MPO staff. I have the honor of being the project manager and the staff liaison to the School Transportation Working Group. Some of you have seen presentations on the efforts that that group is doing, and this is a study that the MPO funded on school safety, and it kind of focuses a lot on the engineering aspects of it, but I wanted to remind everybody, especially given the timing, the school just started and you might have felt the impact on our roadways, that we're also out there with encouragement and education and working with our enforcement partners and stuff to try to also bring safety to those other areas. So, giving out thousands of these slap bands. I wanted to point out we have maps of every single school, demarcating a lot of the stuff that you're going to hear from our consultants here today for every single school in Hillsborough County, charters, private ones included. And then we've been partnering with our Vision Zero initiative. So we have given out the signs and loaned these to parents and stuff to like bring awareness to their school crossing zones. And then our Department of Transportation partners have provided a lot of education materials like the safety posters, bookmarks, and other things. So just want to highlight some of the other fun stuff, and then I'll turn it over to our incredible consultants that helped guide us through this process.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Chris Keller with Tyndall Oliver. As Lisa mentioned, we did a school safety study, really sort of a two-part project. First part was how do we identify the schools to look at, developing a methodology, looking at all the data. And then the second part, which Matt Weaver is going to talk about, is going out in field reviews and identifying improvements for those. So for today, just a real quick, what have we done, what did we come up with, and where are we going from here? Just a reminder that we see this as just the beginning. While our study may be ending, it's the beginning of a longer process. Oh, too far. This slide I showed at every single meeting that I went to, and really want to highlight what our study purpose is and continues to be, and that's to improve safety for the students of Hillsborough County. We may have had a lot of tasks and different things that we're trying to do in the study, but that is the number one thing, and we try to remember that throughout the study, that is what we are trying to do. So how do we identify where we look at and what is our approach and our process to do it? Previously and traditionally, that process was sort of a complaint-driven process to identify locations that may need to be looked at. We were tasked with come up with and develop a data-driven process. What does the data tell us? Where should we prioritize and what areas should we look at based on the data? So we compiled a bunch of stuff along with the School Transportation Working Group. Fortunately, they had done a lot of the groundwork in developing and gathering the data for us to use. We took that, we compiled it, came up with methodology, and came up with a short list of schools to go and review. The first step in doing that, we wanted to compare schools against schools. Boundary sizes, age of students, the sort of culture of the schools changes. So we grouped elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and then we added this other school category. So our charter schools, our magnet-only schools into another one. And we looked at all of those. What do we look at? Within a 2-mile walking boundary we developed, we overlaid this with the attendance boundary of schools. What we came up with was our review area. The 2-mile walk zone is established by state statute as a reasonable walking distance for students. So we came up with our review areas. We looked at things like school-related pedestrian and bicycle crashes, total ped and bike crashes, the number of students that live within that school area, and developed what we called our Screen 1 shortlist schools. From there, a quick map highlighted the yellow. So about the top 30, 35 schools based off of those inputs that came up. And then we took those and we looked at what we called our Screen 2 criteria, which were how many major road crossings are within the school areas. Some demographic and socioeconomic things like the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. Is the area within one of the MPO's identified areas or communities of concern? There was a Getting to School survey that we were able to utilize results from that about walking and biking to school. And we looked at some other things. Is it a traditional school that's, non-charter, non-magnet schools? Is there a higher probability of students walking or biking to and from school? We took those. We developed some weightings and rankings based off of areas. So we did a 2-mile, 1-mile, and a half-mile area. Weighted and ranked those and came up with a list. For this study, we were to identify 10 locations to go at. We actually came up with 12 schools. We looked and saw where some schools were in close proximity to others and grouped those. And from this list, I'm going to pass it over to Matt, and he's going to talk about the field reviews and the identified improvements around those school areas.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Matt Weaver, and I'm with Element Engineering Group.
I apologize. There is a technical issue. I need to stop the meeting.
Was it me? Jokes. Oh.
That's a first for me. It's a first. In 11 years.
Musical interlude or something.
No, yeah. I think you should dance. Yeah. We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Full disclosure, Amber Dickerson participated in the development of this. She's one of our school group members.
I've got lots, thank you.
There's lap bands. Kids love them. And they're really great on gym bags, backpacks, scooters, baby strollers, walkers.
Very interesting.
Look at it when you toss, because you're going to confuse yourself. You're going to, oh, it got that wrong. Oh, it got
These things are going to be snapping.
Put it on anything, it's low light visibility thing, so it goes great on bicycles, scooters, strollers,
Right on that bike path.
backpacks,
With them
gym bags.
They got bike lane.
Yes, they're adding them. That's very, very fun.
Test 1 2 test. Test 1 2 test. Test 1 2. Test. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2 2. Test. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
We appear to be back.
We good?
Okay. From where
Sorry,
you
I
left
broke
off.
it apparently. So again, I'm Matt Weaver with Element Engineering Group. We were tasked with the engineering recommendation aspect of this study. And like Chris said, this is just the beginning. And the thing I always want to highlight at the beginning is that we're already seeing some of the benefits of what we've done. Some of the projects that we worked with Amber on, we kind of did a follow-up review as they worked on Hunters Green Elementary to see some of the things, whether those recommendations we made as part of this were included in that plan that had started just after that on-site circulation plan that had started just after this study got underway. And it was just fantastic. The check boxes of pedestrian connectivity, looking for connections to adjacent neighborhoods, minimizing that mix between buses and cars. So it's really positive that we're already seeing some of the benefits of this. So I'm going to talk about the systemic recommendations that we made. There were some site-specific recommendations, but for today's purposes, we're just going to talk about the broad overview. And then there were also other ongoing projects, whether it was the Florida Department of Transportation, Hillsborough County, or City of Tampa. Everybody seemed to step up and say, hey, what can we do on our ongoing projects? What opportunities do we have that we can take advantage of to address some of these things? So just one really broad example of the recommendations that we would look for is that on 22nd Street here, this is the new Carter Woodson School, I believe the name is, as of this fall. They don't have a sidewalk connection adjacent to the driveway, so if you were to walk to this school from Bush Boulevard, you would have to walk in the driveway to get to the sidewalk on the school site. So those kind of things were what we were looking for overall as we evaluated each of these 12 schools. So overall, intersection and corridor lighting was a big part of what we were looking for. That has safety benefits for the early start times. Even after school events will benefit from addition of lighting, whether it's on-site for parking lots or whether it's along any of the city streets, county streets, FDOT streets. So that was a lot of what we were looking for. And like, for example, the city already has its ongoing lighting project, but this example and these systemic recommendations could be a way for the next administration to look at, hey, school lighting is a hot button issue. Why don't we make our next priority to identify these key corridors going to these schools and say, okay, we're gonna fund lighting these corridors with the new LED lighting. We're gonna work with TECO to have that opportunity taken advantage of to put street lights on each of their poles where we can. So again, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of things already going on. Another example, connections to adjacent properties. We certainly understand the importance of school security and school safety, but if you look at, this is Farrell Middle Magnet School campus in the aerial image there. If you were to be walking from the south, kind of southeast, you would either have to walk all the way straight up north and then to the west, because the main entrance for students is on the north side of the property. And again, we understand the importance of school security and limiting that access, but that extra walking, instead of having a gate at the south entrance or south side of the property, that can add upwards of a half a mile extra of walking or biking for students, and that's a pretty substantial walking distance for students. So we also looked at sidewalk connectivity for priority corridors. We looked at driveway design. A lot of these intersections, or a lot of these schools are near larger intersections, some of which have commercial properties where the driveways are not clearly defined, and so then the walking area, the sidewalks are not clearly defined. So we looked at making recommendations for the access management reviews that FDOT does, that Hillsborough County does, and City of Tampa does. One of the major things that we looked for was identifying ways we could low cost enhance safety. So striping was one of those things. So you can see in this area, this is very close to Farrell Middle Magnet School, and this is one thing that we recommended both to the City of Tampa and Hillsborough County, that whenever you have a crosswalk where students are expected to be walking, or anyone for that matter is expected to be walking, just go ahead and stripe the crosswalk. So that area to the right would be delineated with actual striping at that area, with either wide driveways or even side streets wherever you can. We also looked at signing, so the rapid rectangular flashing beacons wherever we can with some of the mid-block crossings, and then signal improvements, where a lot of the crashes that we reviewed for this study involved what we call permissive left turns, where you have a green ball indication and you're looking more at, as a driver, most drivers are looking for the gap. They're not looking at the side street to see if there's a pedestrian crossing. So then they see a gap in a busy road and they start turning, and then there's pedestrians there. So what we looked for were opportunities to implement restricted turns, which does affect capacity, but we had these conversations with each of the maintaining agencies where you implement the flashing yellow arrows, and you can do that by time of day. So you can have a school entrance pattern where it restricts it to only be a green arrow, and then you don't have that opportunity for conflict with pedestrians. So the maintaining agencies were very open to making that effort in the areas around schools, because that benefits not only the school children but the public in general. And that was another thing that we noticed along many of these corridors, is that we had high transit use corridors as well. And so any of these improvements are going to benefit the community as a whole, not just the students. So along 22nd Street, for example, lots of transit crossings, people using the transit facilities, going to the bus shelters, and then crossing the road. If we implement mid-block crossings along those corridors, we can again enhance the community's safety as a whole. So again, to highlight the signing aspects of the recommendations, there are just some things about this corridor. This is a Florida Department of Transportation roadway. We have some signing things that are not consistent, where the school crossing ahead signage is too high, and then the speeding fines doubled. So a lot of little things that we looked for that were opportunities to kind of make a big change as a whole. So these are all, I'll cover a little later how we communicated these kind of to-do lists with each of the maintaining agencies, but these are the kind of things that we were looking for throughout the study. So one of the other things I wanted to highlight, and that I started to highlight right at the beginning, was that we already have so many ongoing projects, whether it's Hillsborough County with their pedestrian improvement projects, the City of Tampa, they've already started programming projects and doing applications for safe routes to school projects. Florida Department of Transportation, they've already created a subcommittee on the community traffic safety team to talk about these school safety issues. There's just so many ongoing things already that all these agencies were excited about the opportunity to kind of know where to focus their efforts and their resources. So we were excited to be able to provide them the lists. So this is exactly what we provided them. We provided basically recommendations at each school, categorized by level of effort, whether it was low basic improvements that they could do with the striping crew or signing crew, concrete crew, go fix some broken sidewalk. Medium effort may require engineering or some studies, high potential right-of-way, public involvement, capital improvement projects, and then short, mid, and long-term projects. And we ranked those, or we prioritized those. We provided the list by maintaining agency. We provided the list by school. It just really has been a starting point for these maintaining agencies to know where to look and know where to focus their efforts. And we put together cost estimates for the recommendations as a whole. And just as an FYI, for the 12 schools that we looked at, we had about $12 million in recommendations. So there's a lot of dollars, but there's also just a lot of things that you can roll into ongoing projects. So if we were to do the whole list basically as we could, it might not even cost that much, as some of those roads are under construction. Some of those, there's just other opportunities we can take advantage of. So in summary, there's no action. Basically, this was approved by the MPO board, and we just wanted to share information with the committee today.
All right. Well, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners for the presenters? Commissioner Green.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it Matt?
Matt, yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I guess this is the second time I've seen it, but since the first time I've had a couple of questions came up about. One is pretty simple, which has to do with which you brought up. Crosswalk markings, and particularly those around schools. Is there an official city or policy about that?
It depends on what kind of crosswalk you're talking about. If it's what we call a mid-block crosswalk, where it's crossing a major street at an uncontrolled location, then there are rules and requirements for studies that need to be done to do that. But if it's like the side street example that I showed, where it's a stop controlled approach, then you can just do that. You could go out and do that tomorrow, basically. So there's no requirements about that. So we recommended the easy thing, go do that where you can.
Okay, and with the diminished, if I can use that term, diminished school busing within the 2-mile radius of the school itself, does that suggest a need for more crosswalk markings for students who will probably be walking now?
Sure.
As opposed to...
And that's what we were looking at, is that we weren't going to make recommendations to go put sidewalks, crosswalks, curb ramps everywhere. We looked at, these are key corridors that look like the corridors most of the students would kind of congregate to and then go to the school. So like 22nd Street, for example, we know the neighborhoods in the area of 22nd Street, we don't have funding. It's just not feasible to go do that all at once. So we picked key corridors, east-west and north-south, and just kind of provided that grid where they'll get to this sidewalk and then they'll make it to this sidewalk. And as long as we have these crosswalks striped at these stop-controlled intersections, then we're going to cover that walking route. And that was pretty much the methodology we used from an engineering standpoint.
Okay, and my last question has to do with the whether or not your research actually looked at the situation in the wintertime, especially around elementary schools in the morning when it's dark. And we know came before us, I don't know, a year or so ago about traffic queuing at schools and how that was a problem. And I'm thinking in the dark, when you got kids walking,
right,
and you got parents trying to get to work and drop their kids off to school, is that safety situation now even more magnified as a result?
That was included in what we looked at, and the lighting recommendation is absolutely a key aspect of it. And we talked to the administrators at each of the schools, and a lot of them, especially the younger age, were saying on-campus lighting and then lighting as you approach the school. And so those were key recommendations. Okay. We met with Vic, his team at the City of Tampa for the lighting, talked about prioritization, where we wanted to see the quickest updates, and that's the opportunity that we have now, is to go forward and implement that lighting, especially knowing how important it is with this schedule change for these students. So absolutely, that was incorporated.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Commissioner Joseph?
Thank you. Sure. Good report. I think it does a lot to get us towards prioritizing safety for the students at schools. I had a question about the data analysis. Really, it seems like an aerial analysis of data, and being an aerial analysis, I wonder if you found any overlap in the areas and how that overlap may have impacted your recommendations for each of the school, how you handle that sort of thing.
From how it impacted the recommendations, you know, we did the big picture aerial view, and we saw how that impacted or how that related to what the crash data was showing. So we did look at crashes at each of the schools, and the signalized intersections for the major arterials were obviously the key hot spots. And so that's where we wanted to focus on those permissive left turns, permissive right turns. The Fletcher Avenue corridor, while significantly improved, there's still some opportunity where we can change some of the signal phasing, and we talked with the county about that. So there was definitely overlap about, hey, a lot of the corridors with arterials and collectors kind of came to the top just from that aspect of the crash analysis, of the knowing that those corridors are the ones where we have the most crashes, I guess you could say.
And I also wanted to follow on to Commissioner Green's question to find out if you looked at, besides just the morning when it's dark in the winter, if you looked at it through times of day, because obviously each of the school groups comes in and leaves at different times, and how that may have affected your recommendations for prioritizations.
Sure. And what we, again, in the conversations with each of the administrators, it was what are the problems at your school? Does that correlate with the data that we got? And it did seem to be age group related. And a lot of the older schools were, hey, we have after school activities. Can we talk to the school district about getting lighting on, or enhanced lighting at our parking lots? And absolutely pass that word on to the school district. So it was all intertwined, where we started seeing a lot of the consistency in the recommendations. And I'm sure you remember the last presentation I did where I went through each of the schools' recommendations specifically, and there was a lot of consistency, especially, like you said, by the age group, just with the fact that the elementary schools don't have the same kind of after-school activities that the older schools do. So,
sounds good. Thank you very much. Sounds very thorough. Thank you, gentlemen.
Any other? Commissioner Marino.
I apologize, a few questions. The report is great, and I think this is very needed. When you talked to the schools, did you identify if any of them had a walking school bus program or some sort of organized effort within the neighborhood to facilitate safe access to school in the present situation?
Those were things that we brought up in each of our meetings to say, would this be something that would work at your school? And that's absolutely another one of the E's, the 4 E's, the education, and enforcement, engineering, encouragement. Those are things that we need to keep following up on, especially the educational. The walking school bus is definitely something that will help enhance visibility, get the kids doing the right thing, have parents that are there responsible along with the students. But absolutely, it was talked about, and we looked for those kind of opportunities. So it's another one of the follow-up items that we need to keep on, and that's why we have these to-do lists, these action item lists for each of the agencies.
And then just one more follow-up. Did you also identify, you showed how certain schools may not have a safe crossing into the school. Did you identify if the schools had, say, a bike rack or an area for safe storage of bicycles that would facilitate use of bicycles by the students?
Yeah, absolutely. That was another one of the conversations was, if you have students that ride their bikes, where's the bike rack compared to the main entrance? Or are the students going to have to ride through the parking lot to get to that bike rack? Are they riding on sidewalks? Is there a way for them to put this closer to the front so that the students don't have to worry about going out back behind the school? So we had that conversation. I can tell you where Chamberlain's bike racks are. It's one of the things that we talked about. I'm a cyclist, so every opportunity I get that I can encourage that and encourage that safely among the students is definitely an opportunity I'm going to take advantage of.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, thank you. Chris, Matt, Lisa, thanks. Brings us to item number 4 on our agenda, Hillsborough County Port Permit 18-005. Mr. College.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Sean College with Planning Commission staff. This is Tampa Port Authority Permit 18-005. It was transmitted to us by the Port Authority with a request for a consistency determination with the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. And this is pursuant to Chapters 95-488 and 97-351 laws of Florida. The slide before you is an overview of where the project is. It's north of the Cordy Campbell Causeway and just west of the Veterans Expressway. This is a more zoomed in view of the site. It may be known to many of you as the former site of the a la carte pavilion. What is existing conditions at this site? It is an existing dredged canal. There's an existing seawall at the site. There's one existing dock. In some areas along the waterfront, there is a mix of mangroves and invasive exotic vegetation. What is being proposed at this site, the uplands are being redeveloped as a residential project. What is being proposed is 12 single-family docks, 1 multifamily dock, and replace the existing dock with an observation common dock for the community. And some maintenance dredging would be performed where the new multifamily dock would be to ensure there are adequate depths for the use. Considerations for a consistency determination with the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. This is an existing dredged canal. There's an existing seawall. We're not talking about the hardening of new shoreline or a natural shoreline. It is in a developed area. Again, there's also an existing dock on the site already. And the project would promote the continued and expanded recreational activities at the location. With those considerations, staff would recommend you issue the resolution in your packet with a recommendation of consistency with the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan. And that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Sean. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
I think they have expressed that they were here for questions if you had any.
Okay. Before I go to any comments from the commissioners, is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the commission on this item? Seeing none, are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was reviewing this briefing package on, I was a little bit confused, thrown off by the terminology, a single-family dock. I know what a single-family structure is. I know what a dock is. I'm assuming one goes with the other, but I've never heard it sort of put that way. That is either a private dock or a common dock. Okay, but my question has to do with, it's just for my information only, but why so many? Just for kayaks and canoes?
Oh, I don't think it's just for kayaks, for canoes. That's, I think, as I understand it, the single-family docks, as you expressed, were one dock for a single-family lot. Mm-hmm. And I believe the docks would be utilized for both motorized and non-motorized craft, if I'm correct.
Okay. Okay. I think I did see that in the report somewhere. But I was just curious about the amount of infrastructure you're putting in just for a kayak and a canoe. So a lift. At any rate, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Commissioner Joseph.
I just wanted to add a note that in reading this report, I thought it was very thorough, and I wanted to thank you, Sean. I can see that there was a lot of work put into this and a lot of information. It was appreciated, so I just want to say good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I see no other questions from commissioners. I will close public comment and entertain a motion.
I move that we find Port Tampa Bay permit application 18-005 consistent with the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan and forward to the Port Tampa Bay.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Buzza and a second by Commissioner Joseph. All those, any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously by members present. Brings us to item 5. Plan Hillsborough Strategic Plan, our illustrious director.
Good afternoon, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director, here to present our 2018 to 2023 Plan Hillsborough Strategic Plan. Today, we'll go over a little bit about the purpose of the strategic plan, the process that we went through, some about the contents, and then let you know about some of the feedback we've gotten from some of the other boards. As you all know, Plan Hillsborough is a coordinated land use, transportation, and Hillsborough River planning for all 4 local governments in Hillsborough County. So our staff supports all 3 boards, the Planning Commission, the MPO, and the River Board. And this is the first time that, we've had a coordinated strategic plan that incorporates input from all 3 of those bodies. We had a 2014 strategic plan that was very comprehensive and covered 10 areas with 84 objectives, but it didn't really wrap in the input of the other boards. So this will give us strategic direction for the next 3 to 5 years. So the first step in our process was staff synthesized our existing plans and the potential priorities that came out of our different work programs for the MPO and the Planning Commission in particular. We got feedback from you all, the River Board, the MPO through both a survey as well as a combined retreat. Then our staff worked through their own retreat to develop more specific ideas of how to implement the broad topics that came out of your retreat. We also had staff groups that met over the last few months to further refine some of the implementation steps we might take to implement the strategic plan. And then finally, we brought it to the different boards for review and approval. I would like to stop at this point to say a couple of thank yous, because Melissa Dickens on our staff pretty much handled this whole process for me, and so I have a huge thank you to her. Also, she was supported by Hannah Schaefer and Diego Guerra, who are 2 of our summer interns who really helped put together what this beautiful final product that you have in front of you. So here's a couple of picture recapping our retreat from back in March. That was the first time that we all can remember that all 3 boards were together in that format. And that provided direction, as I said, for a staff retreat where we further got into the implementation of those ideas. In addition, at that point, we rolled in some of the things that were more internal agency ideas from our climate survey that we did back at the beginning part of this calendar year. The strategic plan that was developed has 7 areas: planning partnerships, enabling transportation choices, technology and innovation, citizen engagement, opportunities for regional collaboration, linking land use and transportation, and then internal agency enhancements. Those 7 priorities then have 17 strategies to guide the next 5 years. To some degree, they're intentionally broad to give us some flexibility as things change over the next 3 to 5 years. We can adapt and still utilize this strategic direction. It is our intention that we will be providing regular monitoring of the strategic plan. We'd like to bring that back to you every 6 months with a report to the MPO and the River Board at least once a year. So we've presented this a number of times to you all as well as to the MPO and to the River Board. They both have provided resolutions of support at their most recent meetings. And with that, our recommendation is the adoption of the 2018 to 2023 Plan Hillsborough Strategic Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zornita. Are there any questions? Well, no. General public. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment to the commission on this agenda item? Seeing none. Any questions from commissioners for Ms. Zornita? Seeing none, public comment is closed, and I will entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the strategic plan as presented.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Buzza and a second by Commissioner Green. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously by members present. Thank you, Ms. Renita. Item number 6, Hillsborough County consistency finding. Another Melissa, Ms. Dickens.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Melissa Dickens, Planning Commission staff. This item is the Planning Commission review of the Hillsborough County Capital Improvements Program and Capital Improvements Element Schedule of Projects update. This is our annual update. I come before you every year to provide an update on the 5-year capital projects for the county, and then those projects which affect levels of service, which are incorporated in the Capital Improvements Element Schedule update. A little bit about the process for this review. Chapter 97-351, which is the Planning Commission's authorizing legislation, requires that the Planning Commission conduct this annual review of the county CIP. And Chapter 163 in the Florida statutes requires that projects that address levels of service and are adopted in the comprehensive plan be updated and adopted on an annual basis. So the update would replace the existing CIE schedule with the schedule that's in the back of your packets. And this update is accomplished by ordinance. It has a little bit different process. It doesn't go through the state review. It's just updated by a local ordinance. And so as part of this process, we also conducted a review of the schedule of projects. And our review examined both the CIP and the CIE schedule for consistency with the comprehensive plan, as well as the plans of adjacent jurisdictions. This slide shows a summary of the CIP projects by program. There are 8 different program areas. I will note that water enterprise includes water, wastewater, and reclaimed water. And the largest groups in terms of funding are transportation and water enterprise. And the total 5-year funding amount is approximately $1.51 billion for 244 projects. And so those projects addressing level of service, of course, that is the capital improvements element schedule of projects. These projects were identified by the county to address level of service. And what we found in our analysis is that 84% of the funding in the CIP is going towards the 184 projects that address level of service. One item to note for the record, after this packet was completed, the county added one additional project to the schedule. That is the Heartline capital allocation, and this is approximately $1.4 million, and this will be included in the schedule that is being sent to the BOCC. So I wanted to make that note for the record that ultimately what is transmitted will include that as well. And the first step in reviewing the CIP and the schedule for consistency was to take a look at the projects that have been identified by the county as addressing level of service and see how the schedule compares to the priorities that are outlined in the capital improvements element. And one of the capital improvement element policies dictates that funding should first be expended on projects that either maintain level of service or eliminate existing deficiencies before funding is being spent on projects for future growth. And what we found is that you can see that the vast majority, approximately 92% of the CIE funds are slated for projects that either eliminate deficiencies or maintain level of service, so this was consistent with the comprehensive plan policy. The next step in our review process was to take a look at those projects with available geospatial data, so those projects that could be looked at using GIS. And as part of this process, I want to give a big thanks again to our intern, Diego Guerra, who assisted me with this, taking a look at which projects had geospatial data and where they were, and one of the components was looking at which projects are in the urban service area versus the rural area. And what we found is that 97% of the funding is for projects that are in the urban service area. So the vast majority of the funding for county projects is happening in the urban service area. The projects in the rural area were things like renovation of existing facilities, facilities that already existed, fire stations, parks and trails, and there were no things like water and sewer lines that might be contradictory to comprehensive plan policy. So it is consistent with comprehensive plan policy there as well. And then also looking at those projects that could be linked or examined in GIS, we looked at the projects and where they were with respect to the coastal high hazard area. We have policies in both the capital improvement element and the coastal management element, which state that public expenditures and public expenditure for infrastructure and facilities in the coastal high hazard area should be minimized. And what we found is that in total there were 21 projects in the coastal high hazard area, and those projects generally met 3 broad criteria. They either served existing development, they were to renovate or replace existing facilities, or to enhance public access to natural areas and shoreline. So we considered this minimal, and it is consistent with the spirit of the policy, ensuring that county property and expenditure is not subject to unnecessary risk. And so in conclusion, staff's recommendation is that you approve the resolution in your packet, finding the FY19 through FY23 CIP schedule consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dickens. Does anyone from the county wish to speak? No? Okay. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the commission with regards to this item? Seeing none. Are there any questions from commissioners? Okay, public comment will be closed, and I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to find Hillsborough County FY 19 to 23 capital improvement program and capital improvement element of projects update consistent with the future of Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Green and a second by Commissioner Thrower. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously by members present. Thanks, Melissa. Let's spend some money. Brings us to item number 7, City of Tampa Land Development Code text amendments. Mr. Hay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Hay with your Planning Commission staff. The next agenda item is the Tampa Land Development Code text amendments for the City of Tampa. The 4 amendments moving forward today are publicly initiated by the City of Tampa and are part of the January 2018 cycle of Land Development Code text amendments for the City of Tampa. First on to item A. Just a little background regarding this item. On June 15th of 2017, Tampa City Council requested city staff to review and make necessary changes to the design standards for air-conditioned storage and other storage facilities in the City of Tampa. A major component of City Council's request was to deal with the required parking standards for these type uses. Repeatedly, City Council has been granting parking reductions for these uses based on evidence provided by the development community and taking into consideration the unique operating characteristics of these particular types of uses. City of Tampa staff reviewed the regulations and are proposing the following changes. First, removing the requirement for AC storage to be located within a residential structure in the central business district. Currently, the storage to be considered north of Harrison needs to be in a residential structure, and the storage cannot exceed 40%. The city is changing that to require any use. So you could have an office building with storage in it, and it will no longer be just residential that it would have to be in. Another change is allowing AC storage as an allowable use by right. clarifying the definition of warehouse mini in the Land Development Code also. They're also adding parking requirement for warehouse mini in the Channel District. They're also proposing adding specific parking regulations in Seminole Heights. Also, additional changes include establishing minimum parking requirements for air-conditioned storage, also reducing parking requirements for warehouse mini uses citywide, and then adding off-street loading requirements citywide. Your staff has reviewed the request and found three main areas of consistency. The comprehensive plan is supportive of clarifying parking regulations for these uses, especially when they're located within identified urban villages. Originally, the proposed text amendment included language removing the requirement for air-conditioned storage uses to be located in a mixed-use vertically integrated structure within that central business district, especially near existing and planned transit facilities. After discussions, again, with Planning Commission staff and a number of other stakeholders, again, City of Tampa staff have decided to keep the requirement for air-conditioned storage use to be located in a mixed-use structure. Your plan encourages transit-supportive uses within our downtown. The requirement for mixed uses is consistent with the policy direction in the plan. Also, the comprehensive plan is supportive of reducing parking requirements, especially when located within proximity, again, to transit and other, or reducing parking ratios when they've been shown to be excessive. Based on that, your Planning Commission staff recommends that the proposed Land Development Code text amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan. I believe that concludes item A. City staff is here also if you'd like to hear from them.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask if city staff wished to speak. I thought I had seen Kathy earlier. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Catherine Coyle, Planning and Development, City of Tampa. I'm just available for any questions that you may have, but I understand there are some people from the public that would like to speak as well, so I'd like to hear their comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so is there anyone from the public who would like to address the commission on this issue?
Mr. Chairman, board members, Todd Pressman, 334 East Lake Road, number 102 in Palm Harbor, Florida. We do have some concerns about some of the changes that are proposed, primarily, and you received some emails in that respect as well, primarily in the parking. Parking is an element that, of course, controls how big a facility can be. Hillsborough County and the ITE, Traffic Engineers Bible, all state the mini warehouse parking requirement is at 2 spaces per 100 units. What's proposed here is 1 space per 100 units. That's a 100% reduction of that controlling element. We think that's way too liberal. We think that's way too open. There have been no issues at the county. It's what ITE suggests and recommends, and many other jurisdictions as well. So the parking requirement is a critical component in how large these can be built in any area, and it's a concern for how these uses will present themselves in the future. And again, you have a number of emails before you that involve that and some other issues with it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pressman. Is there anyone else in the public who wishes to address the commission on this issue? All right, seeing none, 3 minutes for rebuttal or response.
Thank you. Just to point to the parking ratios, actually citywide, the ratios is proposed at 1 per 50, which is 2 per 100. The only areas where it's 1 per 100 are in downtown and the Channel District, which are the extreme model essentially for the city of compact urban development. And in particular, the location where there's a very limited area. Can I put something on the overhead? There's a very limited area in the central business district. Just for your reference. I don't know how to make that show. Do I have to hit? Okay. The language reference is only north of Harrison. There we go. Which is only this. I'm sorry. Pretty loud. The only area. No. Is it on? Hello. No. Okay, so the only area in the CBD is actually north of Harrison, so it's this small yellow area here. And if you can see within that specific area, if I can zoom in, there we go. You'll notice, I don't know, about a quarter of the area is actually Oak Lawn Cemetery. Storage in a certain sort of way. Also a dead use. Sorry.
No parking needed there.
I digress. There's also 4 apartment buildings. This parcel right here was originally identified, was the old jail site, was also originally identified as the high-speed rail multimodal center. If you've been up there anytime recently, it's a very large City of Tampa parking lot. It was just done. So this is the only place the air-conditioned storage can actually go in all of downtown. And there's ample parking and very limited sites that this use could actually be in. So the 1 to 100 makes sense, and it's only within this area and within the Channel District, which it's already actually located as a permitted use. We're just trying to clarify that the parking should be the same ratio between these 2 areas. In the rest of the city, Mr. Preston mentioned 2 per 100. In the rest of the city, the proposed code is 1 per 50, which is 2 per 100. So I'm available for any other questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Coyle. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Chris.
Kathy. Yes. And David. How do you feel comfortable with such an industrial feeling use in downtown?
Well, it's already allowed downtown based on certain criteria. We're just changing those criteria from special use criteria because the process doesn't work anymore with downtown. The way the new code was adopted in 2016, we're changing those to straight design standard criteria that we have to apply administratively. The percentage is still in the code of 40%, so 60% of the building will be something else. And you also have to overlay the fact that in downtown we have very, very strict public realm standards, so that no matter what corridor you're on, what block you're on, you have that same continuous feeling street by street based on the hierarchy, A, B, and C streets. And you will have active uses no matter what on the bottom level because that's required. So we're actually comfortable. Economic development looked at it too, and it is such a finite area of downtown that it made sense to leave it there since it was already in the code, but keep that requirement and pull back the residential because it wasn't necessarily required in that tiny space anymore because there's so much residential already there. So we're just trying to balance the two.
Mm-hmm. And then how is this, because I know this came up before, and then I think it was withdrawn. Like how is it better now? Because my impression is that the neighborhood was kind of in an uproar about it.
When I originally wrote it, I pulled the 40% out too, and that was probably an oversight on my part to do that in looking at it. Because I was so focused on the design standards that we just put in 2016, and I was so focused at the public realm level that just at the pedestrian level, not necessarily thinking about what's up top. Because I knew the building would look good, but I think the percentage is right. And that's why I put it back in, based on public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Green? Turn it back on. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Kathy. Maybe this is a question more for David because he opened up the the PowerPoint presentation showing what looked to be some very cleverly designed urban self-storage. So, and maybe Kathy, you can chime in on this question also. But the design standards that you're alluding to now, would they be different for the downtown and Channel District versus other parts of the city for this type of storage? So, because what the image that he showed in that picture.
I didn't actually see the image.
Oh, okay.
There are very specific design standards in the Channel District, downtown, and Seminole Heights, and in the commercial overlay districts that we have. So not everywhere in the city has an overlay district or a set of design standards. For example, if you go out East Tampa, East Hillsborough, you'll see the old style mini warehouses with just the rows. It's very industrial.
Right.
It's also heavy commercial industrial zoning. So there are no design standards other than meeting basic requirements. But once you get into the urban villages, into the overlay districts, into the special districts, those basic design requirements we have apply to no matter what use you are. So they will, like in Seminole Heights, say they came in with a mini warehouse. There's one provision in the commercial district standards that you cannot have one material more than 25% of your facade on the front and side street of aluminum or other metal or PVC. You have to actually mix materials so you don't wind up with all metal buildings. We had a case that was done right before the Seminole Heights zoning district was put into place of Air Masters, which is just a big metal building, which the neighborhood was very keen on not having anymore. So we have that one provision. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. We have building placement standards, very specific landscape requirements. Parking has to be pushed to the side or back and heavily landscaped. So the buildings are pulled up, and then there's more decorative elements to them.
Okay. And then my last question has to do with off-street loading, particularly for an urban type of facility like David showed in that image. Now, would that be part of? I thought that was part of this.
It is,
okay.
yes. So what council actually asked us to do, because they had a case last year which spurred this request from them for us to study all of the ones they had done over the last however many years. So we took a 10-year run at it and looked at all the plan developments, because they were noticing they had a couple come in West Tampa, Kennedy, in that area, and they were being asked to waive a lot of parking spaces. But the parking that was proposed made sense for the building that it was. So they asked us to look at it. So we went back about 10 years and looked at all the different PDs across the city. And the average was about 1 space per 50 units. Across all of those, they'd waived hundreds of spaces on all of them. And once you start giving those variances and waiving that over and over and over again, in similarly situated properties, it makes sense to change the rule. As far as the loading, we looked at that as well. And some of these establishments require 5 or 6 loading berths for WB50s or 60s, based on our standard loading, as well as box truck loading spaces. They had been waiving them down also, and what works is one WB50 or 60, can't remember which one it is, but the semi-tractor trailer spot, and then the one box truck, 12 by 35. Okay. So they're one of each, and then your standard spaces and your handicap.
And none of that can happen on
the street. No, it's on your property.
On your property. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Any other questions from commissioners? Seeing none, public comment will be closed, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move for finding Tampa Land Development Code Text Amendment, Chapter 27, AC Storage, Mini Storage, consistent with the City of Tampa's comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Green and a second by Commissioner Buzza. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously by members present. Mr. Hay, item B.
Thank you. David Hay again with your Planning Commission staff. On to item B. There are 5 main areas of change that the city is looking at. They include establishing a written determination for reasonable accommodations related to specific building, structure, or development. They're also outlining requirements and procedures for the zoning administrator or their designee in reviewing requests for reasonable accommodations. They're also providing for a 30-day review period. They're establishing criteria to base a finding regarding reasonable accommodation. And then finally, additional information regarding the overall process, noticing, and general assistance available to applicants. Planning Commission staff found that the proposed Land Development Code text amendment is consistent with a number of comprehensive plan policies. The comprehensive plan supports additional opportunities to provide for safe, decent, and affordable housing without discrimination of any form. The proposed code language ensures that people with disabilities can seek flexibility through the development process and that adopted regulations do not negatively affect an individual based on a disability. So based on that, Planning Commission staff recommends the proposed Land Development Code text amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Does Kathy wish to talk about this one? Or, well, it's not Kathy.
It's not Kathy.
Nope.
Kristen Mora, Tampa Legal Department. This was initiated by the Legal Department to address requests for accommodation and housing or, other various areas. We've been dealing with these types of issues through variances and other similar processes. It's a very inelegant fit for these types of issues, and so this process we look forward to being a better fit for when accommodations are requested for individuals and their housing.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the commission with regards to this agenda item? Seeing none, any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, public comment will be closed. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we find the proposed Land Development Code text amendment, Chapter 27, related to reasonable accommodations consistent with the Imagine 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan.
Second. I have a motion by Commissioner Thrower, and I'll give it to Mr. Marino. The tie goes to Commissioner Marino. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously by members present. Mr. Hay, item C.
Good afternoon again, David Hay, Planning Commission staff. Item C, there's one area that the city is looking at. They're looking at clarifying existing regulations regarding flag signs, providing for a maximum height, width, and overall location on non-residential zoned lots. The comprehensive plan is mostly silent regarding signage, but staff did find that there is policy direction in the comprehensive plan which supports the transformation of the city's mixed-use corridors by providing for a consistent sign program that over time reduces visual clutter. The proposed amendment furthers this policy direction by providing clear limits on the amount of signage along these important corridors throughout the city. So therefore, your Planning Commission staff recommends that the proposed Land Development Code text amendment be found consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Tampa Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Is it Kristen or Kathy this time? Kristen.
Again, Kristen Moore, Legal Department. We're available if you have any questions on this.
Okay, great, thanks. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the commission with respect to this agenda item? Seeing none, any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, public comment will be closed, and I'll entertain a motion again. Don't rush.
Oh, sorry.
We're on a roll today.
Yeah.
I'd like to make the motion to move this forward with finding the Tampa sign code consistent with the 2040 Tampa Comprehensive Plan. Sorry, I had a little stroke there in the midst of that.
Motion by Commissioner Buzza and a second by Commissioner Green. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed? Again, motion carries unanimously by members present. Mr. Hay, 7D.
Good afternoon again, David Hay, Planning Commission staff. Next and final is up to item D. This proposed Land Development Code text amendment seeks a number of minor changes to the Land Development Code regarding the regulation of food trucks and commercial kitchens. Some of the changes include they're adding commercial kitchen definition to section 2743, definitions linking it to state license type, permanent food sales with or without seats. They're also adding food truck definition to section 2743, linking it to state licensing type, mobile food dispensing vehicle. Other changes include they're adding the commercial kitchen use to each of the city-specific districts' use table in same districts that permit retail, bakery, and catering shops. They're also, and finally, they're updating and clarifying parking requirements related to those commercial kitchens. Planning Commission staff found that the proposed Land Development Code text amendment is consistent with policy direction within the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. The Comprehensive Plan supports the regulation of commercial uses to ensure such uses are developed and managed in a way to guarantee the uses do not negatively impact adjacent residential or other non-residential type uses. So based on that, your Planning Commission staff recommends the proposed Land Development Code text amendment be found consistent with the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. Kathy, anything to add?
Thank you, Catherine Coyle, Planning and Development, City of Tampa. I'm available for any questions. I believe there's one comment from the public which I can address.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the commission on this agenda item? Step forward, name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commission. I'm Matt Newton with the law firm of Johnson & Pope, 401 East Jackson Street here in Tampa, Suite 3100. I represent Pro Kitchen Hub. We couldn't be happier with staff and the City of Tampa taking this on. Food trucks have certainly become more and more common in the city, and we're happy that the Land Development Code is catching up with it. Our only comment is that there is a restriction to 3 food trucks for overnight storage. We would prefer to see 4 food trucks. We'll be bringing that up before City Council, but we wanted to bring it to your attention today for discussion if you deem appropriate.
Thank you. Anyone else? No?
Thank you.
3 minutes for response.
Catherine Coyle, City of Tampa again. Regarding the 3 delivery/food trucks, that is already in the code as the stipulation for retail bakery. Because they are allowed to store their delivery trucks overnight at retail bakeries. And council put that in the code, or directed me to put it in the code several years back to address retail bakeries that were all over the city that had overnight commercial equipment parking issues. So 3 seemed to be the reasonable number at that time. When I brought this forward to council to transmit to this body, I simply linked in the word food because it said delivery trucks. I advised council that 3 is what's in there. They acknowledged that it seemed reasonable, but it's something they could discuss, just being quite frank. So we can leave it at 3, they can bring it up, and they can tweak the number if need be, or you can add to your recommendation something else. It's truly up to you. It just seemed easiest to go with the number that was there because 3 seemed reasonable, because some of these are allowed in commercial general districts as well. And commercial general is on a fair amount of the collector roadways and smaller roadways around the city. The intense districts are along the Dale Mabry's and Hillsboroughs, which can handle more commercial parking. But the commercial general can be in and around some neighborhoods and tighter sites. So that's just something council is going to have to weigh. Our recommendation was just to keep it the way that it was.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Coyle. Any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, public comment will be closed, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move for a finding of consistency for Tampa Land Development Code Text Amendment, Chapter 27, related to food trucks.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Green, and I'll throw that tie to Commissioner Kress for a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously by members present. Thank you, Mr. Hay.
He must
and
not have
Kathy
taken a vacation this summer.
And Kristen. Brings us to item number 8, Hillsborough County Land Development Code Amendment. Mr. Kranchek.
Yes, sir. Good evening or afternoon, Commissioners. Randy Kranchek, Planning Commission staff. You're going to get 2 PowerPoints on this presentation, so it's your lucky day. First, Tom Hisney from Development Services will go over the text amendment and provide some of the details of it, and then I will give a brief consistency finding following that. I also want to mention that there was another text amendment accompanying this at one time relating to the RP2 category that has since, for the time being, fallen by the wayside.
Welcome, Tom.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tom Hisney, Development Services staff. The code amendment that's before you is dealing with the redevelopment of mobile home parks for affordable housing projects. The purpose of this is to streamline zoning review requirements to promote the redevelopment of the mobile home parks with affordable housing projects. This amendment was directed by the Board of County Commissioners. I'll point out that it will apply to mobile home parks that are located in the urban service area only. It will not apply to mobile home parks outside the urban service area. Also, the provisions that are before you will require connection to public water and wastewater service in order to redevelop under these provisions. There is a companion comprehensive plan amendment, CPA 1808, that you will be hearing later today. Nearly all mobile home parks in the county are zone plan development. This occurred during the zoning conformance process in the early 90s. Prior to that, mobile home parks were allowed in a lot of different zoning districts, but in 1992 it was felt that all mobile home parks should be zoned PD. And since that time, if you wanted to rezone property to allow a mobile home park, it had to be to a planned development district. Under today's code, if you wanted to change a mobile home park that has permitted a planned development that's permitted a mobile home park, well, usually those zoning districts permit only a mobile home park. You would not be able to redevelop those with, let's say, townhomes or other forms of affordable housing, and it would require then usually a major modification, maybe in some cases a minor modification, but in both of those modifications it involves a public hearing process and approval by the Board of County Commissioner, and that process runs from 4 to 5 months long. So to be able to promote and facilitate the redevelopment of mobile home parks, and again, let me stress right off the bat, in every case we're talking about a lawfully established mobile home park with lawfully established zonings, okay? It felt that what we'd want to do was allow for this redevelopment through an administrative minor change process. So this would be done by staff. It doesn't require any public hearings, so it's a much more expedited process. Now I have to point out that while the vast majority of mobile home parks in the county are zoned PD during the zoning conformance process, a few mobile home parks did escape attention of staff. And so there are indeed some mobile home parks out there that are legal non-conforming uses. So this amendment also provides for the same sort of redevelopment of those legal non-conforming use mobile home parks with affordable housing. Now typically if you want to change a legal non-conforming use, that, as under the code today, would require approval of what's called a non-conformity special use permit by the Board of County Commissioners. An event that, again, involves a public hearing process, and it's several months long. As with the PD modifications, this amendment proposes that to be done administratively. The approval then to change a legal non-conforming use mobile home park to allow redevelopment with affordable housing would be done administratively, therefore obviating the need of the public hearing process. I'd like to point out that mobile home parks with permitted densities which exceed that currently allowed by the comprehensive plan could be redeveloped under these provisions at the same density. Now, under the provisions of today's code, if you wanted to develop an affordable housing project with a density that exceeded the maximum density permitted by the comprehensive plan, you would have to meet a number of criteria that would allow you to have a affordable housing bonus. And these criteria are outlined in both the plan and the land development code. And they deal with things like proximity to transit, to job centers, things like that. So this amendment will specifically state that if your already permitted density of the mobile home park exceeds what would currently be allowed by the comprehensive plan, you could redevelop with affordable housing to that same density without the need to meet the density bonus criteria that otherwise would apply to the affordable housing project. I'd like to point out that there are a few changes to the text that you saw from your workshop. Those changes are marked in double underline in your drafts. Those changes in no way change the purpose, the applicability, or the scope of this amendment. What they deal with was it was felt that we really needed to specify what development standards would apply to these redevelopments. And the reason being is that the section of the code that deals with affordable housing projects and those standards therein really relate to standard zoning district. Well, as I stated, the vast majority of mobile home parks in this county are zone PD. So there would be a disconnect at the time of site development as to exactly what standards would apply. So the new language of that, it clarifies that the standards that would apply in the RSC 9 district would apply to this redevelopment. We chose that standard because when you look at the various regulations, and it links to a table in the code, provides the greatest amount of flexibility in the redevelopment. However, it does state the language that the RSC 9 standards don't apply to the density because, again, the density of the affordable housing project will match the density of the mobile home park that's being replaced. Also, you'll see that the new language also provides for some administrative waivers of the development standards to the minimum extent necessary to achieve the density that's permitted for the project. So let's say I had a mobile home park, had 40 spaces. I want to redevelop it with an affordable housing project with 40 townhomes. But in order to do that, I needed to encroach into one setback by 5 feet in order to fit all 40 units. Well, then the applicant could apply for an administrative waiver for that 5-foot setback encroachment rather than seeking a variance from the land use hearing officer, which again is about a 4-month-long process. And again, this provision is to be consistent with the entire purpose of this, which is to promote and facilitate development of affordable housing projects. So I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tom. Randy, you said you're going to have a...
Might I suggest that if you have any questions on the details for Tom, and then I'll quick go into just the consistency finding?
No, go ahead.
Fine. I'll do my presentation. Piece of cake, huh? Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So, as Tom mentioned, that was publicly initiated by the Board of County Commissioners, and he explained to you the purpose in detail relative to the legal non-conforming parks in the urban service area. So we looked at it from a consistency perspective, and under the future land use, the primary goal is to ensure that the character and location of land uses optimizes the combined potentials. And we think that staff feels that by allowing for this potential redevelopment of those mobile home parks in the urban service area, that certainly meets the test of that goal. Also, policy 1.7 in the future land use element states that the county will create incentives to make development within the USA desirable and cost affordable, and goes on to talk about such incentives. And again, staff feels that this proposed LDC amendment certainly meets that test. And still in the future land use element, Objective 21 calls for encouraging innovative means of providing housing. And as housing prices continue to rise in the county, this certainly offers another streamlined alternative for potentially affordable housing. And then in the housing element itself, goal number 2 calls for the promotion and assistance in the provision of an ample housing supply with a broad range of types and price levels. So staff feels that this proposed text amendment to the Land Development Code meets the tests of the objectives and policies that I've shown you here. There are a few more also included in your resolution. But with that, we recommend that the Planning Commission finds LDC Amendment 18-940 consistent with the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan and forwards it on to the Board of County Commissioners. Now, we are here to answer questions for you, and there may be some members from the public here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Krenchek. So first we go to, is there anyone in the general public who wishes to address the commission with respect to this agenda item?
Sandy Council, P.O. Box 1115, Ruskin, Florida. I just want to commend the staff and the Planning Commission for considering this. We have such a crisis, especially in South County, for affordable housing. So this is greatly appreciated. I think the staff has done a wonderful job after listening to their presentation, and commend you for considering this to pass recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Debbie Canine, 235 Apollo Beach Boulevard, number 171, Apollo Beach, Florida. I just want to add to what Sandy has to say in that the dire need that we have in South County for, and I call it workforce housing. If you'll all consider the 22,000 seniors that we have in Sun City Center, many of whom moved there 50 years ago. I work in one of the retirement communities, the largest assisted living facility in Hillsborough County, actually, and trying to find team members to work with us to care for those grandparents is not easy when there is not any workforce housing nearby. We have dietary, housekeeping, that sort of thing. In conversing with our Chamber of Commerce, we've decided that there's about 3,000 people that commute every day into Sun City Center. Do you think you'd want to do that when you're making $10 an hour or less? Not so much. So anything that you can help create workforce housing nearby would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the commission? All right, any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Buzza.
Thank you. I don't know if this will be a Tom question or not, but I deal with a lot of mobile parks in my line of work in the community banking world. Mobile parks, especially blue-collar parks, tend to be the lowest priced housing out there. The flip to site-built apartments or townhouses, current construction prices, how is that going to increase affordable housing?
Well, it's
with the same density.
Sure. A couple of things there. One, under the affordable housing provisions of our code, a certain percentage of those dwelling units must be maintained and preserved for people making a certain income level. I believe it's 80% or below of the median family income. Secondly, this is a voluntary redevelopment. If someone wishes to maintain a mobile home park, because certainly mobile home parks are a form of affordable housing, but they're not a type of affordable housing that's addressed by the section of the code that we're addressing through this code amendment. As with any project, if someone wants to rent their units at an affordable rate as a developer, they're free to do so. So certainly a mobile home park can remain a mobile home park if the owner feels that, and then there's absolutely nothing in this that is going to endanger any existing mobile home park as far as any rights that they have now. Okay.
I guess the part would be that there would be no public hearings for the change of this PD, so residents would not be able to. Again, it's a private enterprise. I completely understand that, but since there have been no public hearings regarding the change of this PD, that those voices get silenced. And again, as I stated earlier, blue-collar mobile parks are probably the cheapest rents out there to live. That's probably the lowest common denominator rental available out there, and that the low income standard for set aside is only 20% of the project. So what is the benefit of removing the public hearing process other than speeding up timeline? Was that the primary reason?
Yeah, the primary reason is to speed up the timeline, yes, and to facilitate the redevelopment of those projects. Yes, sir.
Well, and yeah, there was a lot of press over the years, and especially in the coastal areas, about mobile parks being turned into apartments and condos and that sort of thing. And a lot of folks, the news became because there was public hearings and there was a lot of discussion, and that will be eliminated in this process. And I have a reservation about that. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buzza. Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom, what's the, I just have a general question, and then I have another issue I wanted to get into related to density. But what is the sort of average density of a mobile home park? I mean, if you use the
they
same.
vary greatly. But the density, if it was a mobile home park approved since, let's say, 92, the density in mobile home park would be the same density that if that property had been rezoned for, let's say, an apartment complex, or, they typically are within the maximum density permitted by consideration of the comprehensive plan. But the density does vary greatly because there is certainly a wide range of permitted densities within the urban service area.
Okay. The reason I ask is because this Manatee County is dealing with the same issue, and we've been doing some work down there, and this came up. What we found is the densities are a little bit higher than a typical single-family neighborhood, but not quite the density of a, let's say, multi-family housing development, let's say. But my question is somewhat related to Commissioner Buzz's question, but along the lines of density, and where's the is this just for affordable housing? That is, if somebody wanted to take advantage of this opportunity, would it have to be 100% affordable housing? And if not, for the same reason that Commissioner Buzzer brought up, was there any consideration of a density bonus for affordable housing?
Well, on 2 points. The affordable housing project would be subject to the same regulations that are in place today for affordable housing. And so, no, it does not require 100% of it be affordable housing. It says 20% or more of dwelling units will be available to households with gross incomes that are below 80% of the median income adjusted for family size. So these provisions don't change that. As far as the density, if someone has a mobile home park and wishes to redevelop that with an affordable housing project at a higher density than what is currently permitted in the mobile home park, and perhaps even higher than what's allowed by the comprehensive plan, well, then they can pursue that redevelopment through the provisions that are in the code today, okay? So if someone had, again, a 9-unit mobile home park, wanted to redevelop, but the plan allowed 12, and they wanted to redevelop 12 or pursue a thing, well, then they can go through the rezoning process as they could today, or a major mod, and redevelop with an affordable housing project, at the higher densities. This is limited to the densities that are permitted by the plan because partly we're doing away with the public hearing process, and we felt that it was important then to maintain the densities at the same level so that in any project that's redeveloped under these provisions, which again are doing away with the hearing process, that the number of dwelling units remains the same.
Right, but I see 2 objectives behind this, though. One, to promote affordable housing, or the inventory of affordable housing, and of course to streamline the process. I'm of the opinion that, well, the best way to do that, of course, is to also to incentivize it in some way, because again, if somebody's going to flip a mobile home park in this economy, in this market, it's probably going to be less affordable or workforce housing.
So if I could add, when you look at this in combination with the plan amendment that is on your public hearing tonight, that plan amendment allows for legal non-conforming mobile home parks to exceed, they already exceed the density of the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So let's say it's a residential 4 area, and the mobile home park, it existed since 1972, and it has 12 units per acre. That's probably a pretty common instance because the mobile homes, as already, can be more compact. This would allow them to redevelop, the plan amendment would allow, in conjunction with this code piece, would allow them to redevelop at the 12 units per acre. Whereas today, if they wanted to redevelop and do anything other than their legal non-conforming use, they would probably have to, they would have to do a plan amendment and a rezoning to get that 12 units per acre in a different housing type. So that's the incentive, is in conjunction with the plan amendment also. The two pieces have kind of to work together because the text amendment to the plan is what is allowing them to potentially exceed the density of their existing comp plan category.
Okay.
If they have a legal non-conforming use.
Or legal non-conforming density.
Correct, right, density.
Because it
That's
could be a
right,
PD
right.
where the permitted density exceeds what's currently allowed by the plan because it was in place by the time of zoning conformity. I understand what you're saying, but I think the focus of this and the fact that the densities are going to be limited to what's ever allowed in the mobile home park today, whether that is within the comprehensive plan or exceeds it, is I think somewhat of a trade-off in the fact that we are doing away with the public hearing process. And I think, and certainly in some discussions we had with some interested residents on this, they felt that was an important consideration in this amendment.
Okay, I understand. I'm just wondering how you can sweeten the pot.
I understand.
Even more so.
All right, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Tom, how many mobile home sites in the urban service area, whether they're PDs or legal non-conforming uses, would be able to benefit from this LDC amendment?
Potentially all of them. I don't know what that number is, though, sir. We have not researched that.
I figured as part of your analysis, you
no,
would
sir.
have looked at the number of mobile home parks.
No, sir. We have not done that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any other questions from commissioners? With that, public comment will be closed, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for a finding of consistency for Hillsborough County Land Development Code Text Amendment 18-0940, non-conforming mobile home parks. That's it.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Green and a second by Commissioner Marino. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries with Commissioners Buzza and Joseph against. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 9, City of Plant City Plan Amendments. Mr. Hudson.
Good afternoon. Mark Hudson, Planning Commission staff. Staff is working on 2 plan amendments for the City of Plant City this cycle. The first of those 2 is PC CPA 1801. It's located in the northern part of Plant City off of North Frontage Road. The vision map in front of you shows its general approximate location within that area of Plant City. This was privately initiated. Being under 10 acres, it is a small scale, about 7.5 acres. The current future land use on this parcel is divided between the southern parcel, which is industrial, and the northern parcel, which is residential 4. The applicant has requested that both parcels be changed to a commercial land use plan category and also to be brought into the I-4 Tech Corridor overlay. What would it entail if this was approved by the Plant City City Commission? The residential development opportunities would remain approximately the same, 24 units today, 23 units after the plan amendment was, if it was approved by the City Commission. However, currently they would allow only 32,000 square feet of industrial uses, and this would transition to over 100,000 square feet of potential commercial uses. The area surrounded by the black dashed line is the area that is subject to this plan amendment. As you can see, the southern portion is the gray for the light industrial uses allowed in the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, and the more tan color to the north is the residential 4. You can see that to the west, it's an industrial corridor along North Frontage Road, and as you go to the east along North Frontage Road, there are more commercial properties. If the proposed plan amendment was approved by the City Commission, you can see the change of the color to the red, similar to the property that is to the east. That was subject to a similar plan amendment back in 2016. No action is required for this plan amendment this evening. We'll be presenting it to you at a public hearing on September 10th. Staff will also be presenting it to the Plant City Planning Board on September 13th at 8 a.m. At Plant City City Hall, and it'll be up for consideration by the City Commission in the evening at City Hall on October 8th at 7:30 p.m. With that, Chairman, that completes my presentation. I stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Are there any questions from commissioners for Mark? Please proceed.
The other plan amendment staff is processing for the city is PCCPA 1802, and it's on Alsobrook Street, more in the central portion of the city as shown on their vision map here. This is a result, this is publicly initiated. Late last year, the City Commission directed Plant City staff to look into parcels that could be surplused and offered for private sale to encourage additional development within the city. City staff went through that process and identified quite a few parcels that were deemed not to be necessary for the functioning of the municipality. However, this parcel, which was identified for sale, the city felt that its land use was out of character with the surrounding uses. So before that was offered to the public, they wanted to go through this plan amendment process. It is small scale, only a third of an acre approximately. It has an industrial land use, and the city is proposing to change this to residential 12. Today, there are no residential opportunities on this property. If the plan amendment was approved by the City Commission, it would increase that to 4. Currently, 8,000 square feet of industrial uses would be allowed based on its land use. Of course, if the plan amendment was approved, those industrial allowed uses would be prohibited. This shows you the future land use map as it is today. You can see the darker yellow color of the residential 12, and you can see that to the north, east, and west there are single-family homes. To the south is an industrial area, and but however, I will say it is well buffered from this neighborhood based on the presence of certain floodplains and wetlands in the area, so there is a significant buffer between this neighborhood and industrial uses further to the south. And if the plan was approved, it would be of a similar density and character to the neighborhood, again, to the north, south, and east. Again, no action is required for this plan amendment this evening. Again, we would be presenting this to you at a public hearing on September 10th in the evening. The Planning Board will receive the same presentation to formulate their recommendation on September 13th. And it will go in front of the City Commission on October 8th for their action. And with that, I complete my presentation and stand for any questions the Commission may have.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions, Commissioner Buzza?
Was it going to be R12?
R12, correct.
Really?
The surrounding areas are all R12 as well.
All down Alsobrook?
Well, this is a little bit south of Alsobrook.
Right.
It's a Jackson Street. I will have some photos in my presentation next month. They've been primarily developed with single-family detached homes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 10, Executive Director's Report. Mrs. Ornita.
Thank you, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. At your seat, you'll find my Executive Director's Report, which is a little longer list since we had a month off. Just a couple of things to highlight. We have gone and been briefing all 4 of the local governments about our 2045 population and employment projections and the work that's being done through our scenario planning in coordination with the MPOs of Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas. So we got to all 4 local governments in the month of June and July. you can take the survey. It's Time Tampa Bay. And please encourage your friends, family, others who live in Pasco, Pinellas, or Hillsborough County to take the survey. We've got bunches of these cards if you want to take them and hand them out at meetings or classes you're teaching, whatever you might have. We'd love that. We'd love for folks to weigh in on the different transportation improvements and how they might move us closer to our vision, particularly for Hillsborough County, that we developed during the Imagine 2040 process. That survey will be running from now till the end of September, and we'll be doing a number of outreach events. We have a very long calendar, including we'll be at the home show over Labor Day weekend. If you have any community groups that might be interested in having a presentation, please let me know. We'd be happy to reach out to them and get in front of them with the presentation. A couple of other things I wanted to mention. Also at your seats, you'll find a draft of a newsletter that we've been working on with the county administration, updating on a number of land use and transportation projects that we're working on, the county's working on, either through development services, economic development, or public works. And this is sort of a format that we're playing with to see how that works to convey all of this information, because there's a lot of different projects that are happening and want to give the Board of County Commissioners updates from time to time on them. A couple of them that I wanted to highlight, we have been working, and you'll see a couple of the meetings have related to working on the comprehensive plan update, specifically a number of the infrastructure elements, and formulating them together into an integrated one water element. So that's something we've been talking about and are excited to see how that might come to fruition. You'll be seeing a plan amendment in the that'll come to your briefing in September for some economic development policies to streamline and provide some incentives in that area. Then we've been really excited to see how the county has taken our Brandon Corridors pilot project and are focusing on a couple of redevelopment areas in the Brandon area and doing some more detailed pro forma real estate feasibility analysis there. So we've been working with them on that. And then the last one I'll highlight, it happened to be in our newsletter as well. We recently completed a draft of an East Rural area assessment, looking at how the area south of State Road 60 and east of the urban service area has changed over the last 10 years, and we're looking forward to providing that to the Board of County Commissioners in the future and getting some input from them. The last thing I'd like to mention is that there are two contracts that I'm looking at. One is to document some of our internal processes. As we're looking at a number of retirements, we've talked a lot about succession planning, and one of the things we've identified is that we do not have as good a documentation of our internal processes for things like processing a plan amendment or reviewing rezonings as we might like. So we're looking at a contract to have somebody come and help document all the steps that we do, because it's not something that staff necessarily has time to take away from what they're doing to document all of that. So we could use some help there. Also, we're talking with a consultant about a very short sort of commercial video about our FLIP program for students. APA Florida actually came and filmed part of our FLIP program as part of some promotional videos that they're doing for about just the value of planning. And so we are talking with their consultant about could they take that same video footage and make sort of a commercial for us. So we're looking, that would be about $1,500 to do that. So just wanted to make you aware of those. And that's all I've got, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anita. Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Melissa, I stepped out a moment. Maybe you probably mentioned this letter of intent.
Oh, I didn't. Thank you for reminding me. I forgot about it.
I had one question and one sort of possible correction. In that first paragraph, it talks about the interconnecting the Hart Bus Rapid Transit projects along the corridors known as Nebraska, Florida, and Fowler Avenue. Shouldn't that be Fletcher Avenue?
No, actually, the BRT project that Hart is looking at would go on Fowler.
I thought they currently run on Fletcher.
Yeah, if currently it does.
But, okay, so
they're looking at perhaps
Okay.
Actual dedicated lane BRT, which is
Okay.
a little different than how Metro
Okay.
Rapid operates, and doing that on Fowler potentially.
Okay, and my second question is why is the study just limited to these two areas, the downtown streetcar extension and the BRT corridors?
Two reasons. One, I believe there were certain requirements for the FTA grant that they had to be through a certain stage of planning, which, and also those are projects that Hart and the city have control of. The regional transit feasibility plan that we're going to have some continued discussion with, hopefully while y'all are eating dinner, is something that would probably be managed by T-BARTA ultimately. So since Hart and the city of Tampa were our partners in this, those are the projects they wanted to focus on.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Any other questions for our director?
Okay.
Thanks, Melissa. All right, that brings us to other business. Chair's business, none. Old business. New business. Committee reports, I'll go really quickly. I can give you for the Technical Advisory Council for the Hillsborough River Board and the Hillsborough River Board meeting. Very simply, we weighed in on our Plan Hillsborough strategic plan that you saw today, and we also discussed and decided upon our River Board Award recipient. You'll have to come to our Planning and Design Awards banquet to see that person. And that's basically it. So are there any other committee reports?
Yes.
Commissioner Green.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Very quickly, MPO Board report. There was a July 31st meeting and the June 12th meeting. The only thing I wanted to report on was from the June 12th meeting, and that was when the board adopted the TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan. And I guess the biggest issue this year was that there was the removal of the express toll lanes from 275 north of downtown from further consideration as part of the Tampa Bay Next project. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Commissioner Green. We have time? Okay. Yeah, we have our workshop across the hall with dinner. With that, we're adjourned. Thanks.